Welcome home, Cojourners. I'm so glad you're here for another episode, and I know it has been a while, and I am glad to get us going again in this beautiful journey of coming back to ourselves, reclaiming ourselves. And today we have a special guest, a wonderful psychologist who is representing a team of psychologists who have come out with a new book, You Will Get Through This: Help for Depression, Anxiety, Grief, and More, a mental health first aid kit. Dr. Julie, thank you so much for being with us today. How are you?
I am well. Thank you, Dr. Thema, for having me.
Oh, absolutely. I love the work that you do. And one of the big focus and interest areas for me is how do we get this information beyond the academy and not just in our individual offices, but to the public. So I love that the three of you have worked together to create this resource that is going to be so helpful to many, many people. So tell us a bit about the three co-authors and how you all came together to work on, and I love the title, You Will Get Through This.
Yeah. Started with the idea about 2 years ago. I had started to have this feeling related to noticing a pattern between friends, family, the clients that I was caring for, related to people coming with questions that they were finding information related to what they thought was going to help their mental health, their physical health, this kind of like biopsychosocial perspective of their health, finding the information online in some places that were less than helpful, or the information just wasn't as complete as we would have wanted. And I had this idea of, what if there was a compendium, really like brief, concise, clear cut, understandable, like cutting through all the jargon. Like, what if there was a place people could go to find the information that their therapist, their psychologist would want them to know? If they're waiting 2 months for an appointment, here's something to get you started. It's a first aid kit, right? It's the like, oh, how do I find the Band-Aid that's going to help me, take a first step toward managing my chronic pain, or if I'm experiencing loneliness or work stress. And so with that idea, I knew I could not do this alone. And part of that idea was shaped by bringing in two colleagues who I've known for decades, each of them. Dr. Nicole Helverson, who is a psychologist, and Charity O'Reilly, who is a licensed professional counselor. And both of them come with their own wonderful in-depth experiences. So Dr. Helverson, Dr. Nicole focuses, her specialty areas are on grief and eating disorders. And Charity focuses, she's got so much experience in the trauma area, working with individuals who've experienced all types of trauma. She used to work for a community service group that was free services for people who'd experienced trauma in all different types of forms. And so the three of us joined all of our, experience, but also went through all the research and tried to really distill, what do we want people to know? What's going to be helpful? Like, if you're struggling yourself, or if a loved one is dealing with something and you're like, how do I approach this? How do I help? How do I say the right thing, quote unquote, to have a toolbox, a first aid kit for people to say, oh, let me pull out this book and look at the chapter on generalized anxiety, or the chapter on intimate partner violence. Like, what's the quote unquote right thing to say? And not that we give you the right thing to say, but we give you some gentle things to consider in how you might go about caring for yourself in those types of situations, but also expressing your concern and your support to the people that you love who might be experiencing those situations.
This is so beautiful and so helpful. I love that you cover a range of topics, because over the course of our lifetimes, we can have multiple challenges, but also the challenges of our loved ones. And so you not only talk about these issues as it relates to us, but also what if a loved one is dealing with it. So on today, let me say that you all cover mental health, social health, sexual health, physical health, and getting support. And we're going to talk today about physical health and the mind-body connection. And so the first topic that you all cover, which I think is so important, is around body image. So can you tell us some about what is body image and what shapes it?
That is a great question. So, body image, and again, our mission with this is to make it not be complicated terms. So, I'm going to use like real talk here. So,
Mhm.
body image is basically the culmination, the grouping of all of the messages that we receive throughout our lives from our family, from our friends, our social group, from the media about how we're supposed to view our bodies. So we all live in a vessel, we live in a body. And this sense of what the image of our body is shaped by all of this feedback that we're getting from everyone and everything around us all the time. And there was some research back in the day, and I'm going to get the numbers sort of wrong. This is not in the book, but this is just related to this body image. We get like thousands of messages from the media a day. And they're not all about
Mm.
body image, but a lot of them contain that, right? Who's the person eating the burger in the commercial? And who's the person showing you the fancy new car? All of these subtle messages tell us that we need to be unhappy in how we are, because that fuels the systems within which we live that make money off of, well, your teeth aren't
Mm.
white enough, or your waist is just a little too wide, or oh, your feet are too big. Are you sure? Or you're too short. You sure don't want the insoles and the like lifts in your shoe? Every part of our body has been created, like stories around them that tell us that they're wrong in some way. And so we really wanted to focus this chapter on the fact that that's a pretty common struggle across all genders now. It's not only one gender versus another. Most people have body image types of concerns, and that there is something to be said for neutral, like thinking about our bodies in a neutral way, because there's a body positive movement. So thinking about our bodies in a positive way, and sometimes that can be really hard. And so then there's this idea of like neutrality about our bodies, that your body is trying to take care of you. It doesn't care what it looks like, what it just wants to help you process food and help you get up in the morning and help you care for your loved ones. And so we more really wanted to, knowing how pervasive this topic is and the people that we talk to and family members and friend, like this is just kind of a pervasive topic that affects most people on the planet. We wanted to
Mhm.
make sure that this is something we focused on to give people, again, some first aid strategies to start thinking about this topic. If you're walking around feeling really crappy about yourself for whatever reason, hopefully this chapter in our book will help give you some starting steps to say, oh, maybe I'm not even aware of how critical I'm being about
Mhm.
my image right now, and help people kind of take a step back to say, well, how do I want to feel right now? And if my thought is telling me one thing, I am not my thought. Just because I'm having that thought doesn't mean that that's a fact or that that's
Mm.
true. And helping people take the first couple steps to notice that and to be a little bit more gentle and kind to themselves.
It's so important as you're naming the gentleness, the kindness, and I want to say having to be intentional to push back on these media messages. And unfortunately, because we all consume the media, then we can also get these messages from our family, from friends, from potential dating partners. It is everywhere. And so it can be very challenging to have, I would say, like this radical commitment to seeing your beauty and seeing the beauty of others, even while we're getting these messages. So, along those lines, I think being intentional about affirming ourselves, but also being careful that we're not repeating these messages to our loved ones, friends, children, whomever, where people are deciding, like, who's the cute kid and who is the unattractive kid, or even among friends in our peer group. Can you say something about both, the gentleness with ourselves and also our role with other people and their body image?
Yeah, yeah. I really resonate with what you're saying about the messages that we hear from our loved ones, and we hear in what are supposed to be kind of like safe spaces. And I'm mindful of people that I've heard from just recently about wanting to figure out how to set healthy boundaries with loved ones, because their loved ones will say things around their children about
Mhm.
other groups of people or other individuals' appearances, that they're like, I don't want my kid to hear that. I don't want them to carry all of the icky kind of thoughts that I grew up with
Mhm,
related to how somebody's quote unquote supposed to look or
mhm,
supposed to be. And so, to that point, in those moments, it's important to speak up to our loved ones,
mhm,
to say kindly that we get that their intent may not be to be cruel or to perpetuate, being judgmental, and that they might not even have known that that message was being felt in a really hurtful way by,
mhm,
the listener, by their loved one. But gently saying, like, hey, loved one, like, I'm not sure that you recognize how that affected me in that moment.
mhm,
And I'm mindful that I know you weren't intending to hurt my feelings or make me feel judged. What you said had that effect. And
mhm,
I'm hoping that we can be mindful. We both can be more mindful about how we talk
mhm,
to each other, because I'm not perfect at this. And like, can we figure out how to come up with something we might say if one of us says something that feels uncomfortable, and to
mhm,
have like a safe phrase, to have, a way to call each other in rather than calling each
mhm,
other out in those
mhm.
moments.
Thank you for that. It is a reminder for us to try to speak up, because sometimes if we don't say anything, the behavior continues or even intensifies. Or sometimes I know what people will try to do is join in with the laughter, even though they're really hurting. And so, but it's not funny. And as you name, like, it can be very hurtful. So if this person is supposed to be your friend, your family member, your partner, what it means and what it feels like for them to ridicule or, make negative comments about your body and about your appearance. So that is an important one to keep in mind, and to say, in your example, it was someone who didn't intend to be hurtful. And I will say, if someone is intending to be hurtful, for us to reflect on, what is the nature of this friendship, right?
Mhm.
Is this really my friend, right? Because they're
Mhm.
they're trying to make me feel bad about myself.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that topic. Another sometimes can be related topic, not always, is you all have a section on our relationship with food. And can you talk about kind of the psychology of that, or how our mindset is connected to the way we think about, approach, and act with food?
Yeah. It's complicated, right? I mean,
Yeah.
especially in America, and it's similar in a way of there's so many layers that come with thinking about food. So sometimes families, that's the way you connect. That's the way you share your lineage, your like family history. So food, it can be a way that you connect with the people that you love.
Mhm.
Also, nourishing each other through food is a way that we take care of each other at times. Of, oh, you're feeling bad, let me bring you food. Or similarly, that's maybe the lessons we've learned when we were growing up. Oh, when I felt bad, my mom brought me a bowl of soup,
Mhm.
so food is my comfort. Food
Yeah.
is the way that I need to comfort myself. We also live in societies where the types of things that we eat are loosely considered food at times, because they are just like constructed of all the corn syrupy, sugary
Mhm.
goodness that is not healthy for us, but is something that makes us crave more.
Yeah.
And so food is one of the ways that we tend to cope. It connects with so much of our history, so much of how our emotions get processed. And so, like, food connects with the dopamine centers in our brain. Like, if
Mhm.
you eat a great chocolate chip cookie, I love a chocolate chip cookie. Like, when I eat that cookie, like, my brain is telling me, "Good job. Thank you for
Mhm.
this." And part of that is great. Like,
Mhm.
I do
Mhm.
need food. I do need to nourish myself. Other, like, thoughts that are important at that time are that, did I actually need that cookie for fuel at that moment? Or was I trying to soothe myself and get that dopamine hit in a way that was through that cookie, but maybe could have been in another way? Maybe if
Mhm.
I was able to self soothe by deep breathing, by reaching out to a friend, by
Mhm.
journaling, by doing something else that wasn't soothing myself with food,
Mhm.
but was soothing myself in a way that ultimately still made me feel safe and okay. And that food is complicated. And the tricky part of this is that the more we focus on food, the harder it can be to feel like we're in control of it, because it gets to the slippery slope of that there are eating disorders on all sides of food consumption. If we eat too little, if we eat too much, if we eat too much in certain periods of time, if
Mhm.
we are avoidant of certain types of food, like there's all these complicating factors around food. And the beautiful part of life is that we need it. We need food.
Mhm.
But figuring out how we have a healthier relationship with food while not letting that be all consuming in whatever
Yes.
way is an important, like, it's just something to be important, and I'm sorry, to focus on, because it's so like part of who we are as humans. We need to eat,
Mhm.
and doing that in a healthy way by taking a step back and just asking yourself, like, what is your relationship with food? Do you have other tools in your toolbox for taking care of yourself if you're having a crappy day? You get home from a long day of work and you're like, I need something to help me self-soothe. Sometimes
Mhm.
we go to food. Sometimes we go to other like substances or
Mhm.
other things that aren't super helpful. But it's one of those really like essential parts of life that can get us into really unhelpful habits that we
Yeah.
have around, and that there's a lot of guilt and shame centered around
Mhm.
as well. It's
Right.
really hard to have a healthy relationship with food sometimes.
I love that you name coming up with or expanding our coping strategies or our emotional expression strategies. Because, some of us eat when we're nervous, eat when we're depressed, eat when we're angry, even eat when we're celebrating. Like if you have good news, it's like, let's go get something to eat or let's go get dessert. And so that it is good to be able to mindfully enjoy your food, enjoy the company with which you or the community and family with which you share meals, and at the same time have other ways of responding, right? I've heard people say, like, what am I really hungry for? So if the real hunger is social
Mhm.
connection, right? But instead I'm just eating to soothe myself, it didn't really meet the need. So let me try to address the real need. And then also, of course, restriction around our food, sometimes trying to control things, including trying to control our bodies. So, as you name, a first step is becoming more aware. How do I think about food? Are there times I'm eating when I'm not actually hungry? And also around self care, am I giving myself things that are nutritious that can bless my life instead of create more difficulties for me? So I'm so glad that you all incorporated this and also, recognize the nuance, the diversity of issues and factors that can affect how we approach food. Another section you all have in the physical health domain is chronic pain. And this is so important. Of course, the older I get, the more I know people who, really struggle in this area. Talk to us some about chronic pain and then what are some pointers for how to cope with it.
Yeah, and I resonate with what you're saying, that it's the more we age, but also just multitudes of people live with pain. And this is really relevant to why we chose this as a chapter. Oftentimes, as frustrating as it can be, pain is a normal part of life. When pain becomes chronic is when it's unresolved for like weeks at a time. And I believe it's at 12 weeks that it hasn't really resolved. And the things that you've tried, like maybe aspirin, Tylenol, those kinds of things, haven't resolved the pain. So, this chronicity, the ongoingness of pain has a effect on our mental health, our emotional health, our social well-being, and as well as our physical ability to do the things we want to do. And it can really have a like all-encompassing negative impact on what we feel like we can do with our lives. So thinking about and some examples to make this hopefully make sense for listeners. So chronic pain can be things like fibromyalgia, which is I purposely choose this as a highlight because it's a frustrating diagnosis for people in that it's what's called a diagnosis of exclusion. So it's one of those diagnoses that pain might show up in different parts of the body for different people. There's not one, oh, it's always in the back or it's always in the ankle or like chronic pain, like this fibromyalgia chronic pain is different for different people. And it also, because of that nature, there's a requirement that there needs to be a lot of testing and a lot of ruling out of other types of diagnoses. That's why other things need to be excluded before you can be diagnosed with it. So people might live with fibromyalgia types of pain for months, maybe even years before they even know the diagnosis. And that can be a little bit, I'm going to say in a kind way, frustrating because it might make you think there's something wrong with you. Like, well, maybe it's all in my head. Maybe, when I go to all these medical appointments and they say, well, we're not finding anything here. We're not finding anything here. Like, is it all in my head? And that's a really important part for chronic pain is that we want to validate it's likely not all in your head. The pain that you feel is true for you, but also no one can completely understand anybody else's experience of chronic pain. So the strategies related to that, knowing that there's no like one like shoe will fit everybody in helping manage all the different types of chronic pain out there, there are some like universal strategies. So things like activity pacing. So the pattern that often comes up with chronic pain is someone will say, oh, today's a bad day. I can't do any of the things I need to do. And they lay in bed or they rest or they take it easy. And then maybe the next day or a couple of days later, they feel like they are a little bit better and they have some energy. And they're like, oh, I wasn't able to do any of those things I needed to do before. So now I'm going to try to do them all. And they, go overboard. And that again can look like different things. Going overboard, quote unquote, might be I washed all the dishes in the sink, or I washed all the dishes and did laundry. Or, you can add on to that, but it's different levels for different people. So it's figuring out, well, when you are having a good day and you want to accomplish things, how do you do that in a way that you're taking a balanced approach to maybe doing some activity and then resting, doing some activity and resting. So pacing your activity level, because what usually happens is if you have those days where you feel like you can't do anything, and then the day when you can, you just go so much and so hard, and you're like, I got to do all the things. What usually happens is you pay for it the next day or the next day, and it keeps you out, it puts you out of commission because you overdid it. And now you're just in too much pain and you're in bed or on the couch for days in a row. So instead of going all or nothing on those days where you feel okay, treat yourself with kindness, compassion, and pace yourself. So even if it feels kind of like, but I have energy, I want to do all the things, take time, give yourself a break, give yourself multiple breaks. Sometimes it's washing one dish, going and resting, coming back. As frustrating as that may feel, if you're comparing yourself now to what was the quote unquote normal, your old normal, you're figuring out a new normal and treating yourself with kindness for where you are now. Activity pacing in the way of meeting yourself where you're at and trying not to overdo it will hopefully help you. Yeah, you might need to rest the next day, but it doesn't hopefully put you out of commission for that whole day or the next 3 days.
Right.
So pacing yourself in what you do.
I love that. Not comparing ourselves to other people, not comparing yourself to your prior self, but having that compassion, that gentleness, and thinking ahead. Like you said, if I put if I exert myself so much now, what's going to be the cost later? And so shifting my pace and my expectations of myself.
Mhm.
I just want to ask for one or two pointers from the one on sleep, because I know that's a big one for a lot of people, difficulty with sleep. So, what are some things that psychologists or other mental health professionals have found that can be helpful?
Yeah. So one of the things I want to tell everybody to do, because it's the frontline evidence-based treatment for sleep, for insomnia, for difficulty with sleep, is to find somebody to help you do CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. But that was one, beyond the scope of first aid, and two is hard, right? So we wanted to say, well, what can you do while you're waiting to get in to see somebody for CBTI, or say you never see somebody for that treatment? What can you do to take care of yourself? So the strategies I would share with you all is there are components of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And one of those components that has 5 parts, and I'll run through them quickly, is what's called stimulus control for sleep. And so things to do that are evidence based that are going to sound hard. I feel it. I know you. I get it. Like, listener, I understand. It's good. You're like, oh, it's so easy for her to say, and it's so hard to do. I hear it. But if you open your mind a little bit to curiosity and thinking about how you might implement these, what's recommended is to have a regular morning rise time every single day of the week. If you get up at 6 a.m. weekdays for work, get up at 6 a.m. on the weekends too.
Mhm.
You want the same amount, the same rise time. You want to only go to bed when you are sleepy, not tired. We're all adult human beings tend to be tired.
Mhm.
Sleepy is my eyelids are heavy, like my head is drooping. If you left me alone for a couple minutes, I'd probably be asleep. Going to bed when you're sleepy, even if that means you're going to bed later than you thought you would, which connects to another strategy for stimulus control sleep, which is not laying in bed awake. So if you go to bed, you're like, oh, I'm sleepy. My eyelids are droopy. I'm doing it. Dr. Julie said, go to bed. Go into bed. And then you can't fall to sleep or fall back to sleep in what feels like 20 minutes. You don't have to watch the clock. Please don't watch the clock. But like you're like, I'm not able to fall back to sleep. Get out of bed, go, if you can, to another room or to a chair in the room where you're at, a different setting than your bed where you're trying to sleep, and read a boring book. So invest in a book that is not an interesting book. You don't want this book to keep you awake. If you're like, I'm interested in learning about George Washington, but will he keep me awake at 3 a.m.? He sure won't. And that's the book you read. And then when you're sleepy again, your eyelids are drooping, go back to bed. You don't have to stay up all night. Another strategy is using the bed only for sleep and sex. Try not to be on your phone in bed. Try not to watch TV in bed. I literally I've heard the things like pay your bills on your bed, fold all your laundry. I'm like, you want to have your brain learn that your bed is only really for sleep. And then finally, this is also sometimes either a really easy one for people or really hard. Don't nap. So you want your brain to think about your bed as the place that you go to sleep, and you want it to think about that you sleep at bedtime, not during the day, or if you work at night, like not, during different times when you're trying not to sleep. You want to sleep for like a solid chunk of time at your sleep time, like the one time of day that you go to bed. And so trying as much as you can not to nap, and like you're basically telling your brain, well, I don't have to sleep at night because I'll sleep during the day. And sometimes that's needed. If you're going to not be able to function, you need to take a couple minutes of sleep. Okay. But as much as you can, really try to avoid napping because that'll help you be tired enough to hopefully stay asleep when you lay down to go to bed.
Oh, thank you so much for giving us those pointers. And as you recommended, if people can get support with a therapist, that can be a great addition. But also, this book has really practical things that people can do on their own. So I want to encourage you all to check out You Will Get Through This, a mental health first aid kit. It is out and available now. And whether you're dealing with mental, physical, social issues, this is going to be a great resource for you to understand what's happening and to get some practical steps to address it. Thank you so much for being with us. And I want to say to our listeners, I invite your soul to tell your heart, mind, body, and spirit, welcome home.